important pillars of the Islamic economic system. They are the backbone of the Islamic social finance system. They represent the two most important pillars of Islamic philanthropic and Islamic voluntary sector. Every economy, especially an Islamic economy, has three sectors. The first sector is the governmental sector, called the public sector. The second sector is the private sector. And the third sector is the philanthropic sector. And that's why when in some fora they talk about public-private partnership, we talk about public-private and philanthropic partnership. These two, zakat and waqf, represent the pillars of the Islamic philanthropic social finance sector. Zakah is a compulsory levy, compulsory charge on an amount of money or wealth that reaches certain threshold called nisab, which every Muslim who owns it and fulfills certain conditions must pay annually. And it is charged from the rich and distributed to the poor. The Quran is clear about the 8 categories of the beneficiaries, and the Quran and Sunnah are also very clear about the zakatable wealth and the percentage to be charged in each segment of wealth. And I hope those at the back will allow us to continue, or rather we listen to them because the disturbance is too much, please. The background noise from the back is much. Let us have one house. When they finish, we continue, please. Okay. So this is zakah. It is compulsory. It is charged from the wealth of the wealthy and given to the poor. It is compulsory. It is paid annually. It has certain percentage, and there are zakatable wealth. On the other hand, we have waqf. Waqf is not compulsory. It's a voluntary charity that is sustainable and perpetual, where a person takes from his or her own wealth an asset that is not easily perishable, an asset that can be used time and time again without perishing, without exhausting. Then that person who owns that asset decides to take it away, to relinquish that ownership right and give it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that the benefit of that asset will be distributed to certain categories of people, either restricted or unrestricted, either specified or unspecified. While zakah is compulsory, as I said, waqf is not. Zakah has specific people to be given to. Waqf has no this. Zakah is charged from the wealth of the wealthy. Waqf can be done by a poor, by the wealthy, by the middle class. You know, you do waqf, you do zakah. The only people who will benefit from a person's zakah are the poor, the needy who are mentioned, but your own relatives, people who are your dependent cannot benefit from that. You cannot chop your own zakah wealth. But in waqf, you can benefit from a waqf you created, and your dependents can also benefit from a waqf. In fact, you can do a waqf for your own dependents. What is very important about these two important institutions is the fact that if well managed, they are capable of not only addressing the problem of poverty, hunger, squalor, underdevelopment, but importantly also, they can take the society to the path of development. Historically, this has happened, and this has been acknowledged even globally today by the United Nations and also the World Bank, that if the Muslim world will effectively utilize zakah and waqf, in fact, they say even partly, if we can mobilize zakat and waqf resources, even if partly, we can chase out poverty. They said from Middle East, Sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia. In other words, in all the communities that have the largest population of Muslims. If we do that, we can address that problem. We have no reason to live in hunger, in backwardness, without jobs, in unemployment, with zakah and waqf. These two institutions actually represent this very important. I don't know whether I have answered your question, and I can go.
Justice to that. In the absence of any mic, I'll be as audible as I can.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the tax reforms and how it has been a subject of public discourse. How does waqf and zakat, how does it relate to the tax reform? Does it have any effect?
Use the mic.
Okay, so you can sit, Doctor.
Okay.
Thank you. So let's talk about how waqf and zakat
intertwined. What comes together when it comes to the reforms, the tax reforms we've been talking about as Nigerians. Does the tax reform affect WACAB or Zakat in any way?
Well, I think the best people to talk about tax reform are here. The tax reform has come with a lot of mixed reactions, with people having a lot of reservations, sometimes informed, sometimes less informed reactions about, the tax reforms. What we know is that as far as even Islam is concerned, tax is something that is legitimate for the government to charge based on need, so that certain social welfare services will be provided. What I know is that from the perspective in the Sharia, this is acceptable, this is allowed, and the scholars of Islam have actually talked about that. As Nigerians, therefore, we shouldn't have any problem with tax, all things being equal, ceteris paribus. Of course, we have the right to also talk about reforms and policies that are not necessarily, in tandem with the general overall interest of the society.
So
Now,
the arrow has been pointed to the man who is from the government side. So let's take the man to
yeah, when he talks about that, then we talk about the relationship with Zakat.
All right, so we'll come back to you after that. Many Nigerians hear about tax reforms. We've complained so much about it. At some point from the beginning of this year, we're talking about if you want to send something to someone, you have to specifically narrate it. Which, of course, the NRC come out to talk about this. As the chairman, presidential fiscal policy and tax policy committee, let us understand what this tax reform is. Maybe you could be changing someone's narrative, sitting down here right now at this place.
All right. Well, let me start by correcting the MC. My name is Dr. Abubakar. I'm not Mr. Taiwo. I'm here to represent Mr. Taiwo Oyedele. He's the chairman of the session committee, as you mentioned. I'm a member of that committee. I'm the executive chairman of the Council of Service. We are representing Mr. Taiwo. I want to use this opportunity to thank this foundation for extending their invitation to our committee. And Mr. Taiwo said I should extend his warm regards to this foundation. He has made all the possible efforts to be here, but because of the clash in programming, he's actually attending another program outside Nigeria. Hence, he asked me to come here to represent him. Well, talking about tax reforms, and let me start from the question, possibly you asked my colleague here, the effect of tax reform on Zakat and Waqf. Well, during the course of the presentation made by the chairman, I think, of this session today, he alluded to the fact that there were a lot of engagement that took place with the committee, where there was an advocacy as with respect to, engaging or allowing Zakat to be a deductible, deduction for tax purposes. Well, as a member of the committee, I think we worked closely with faith-based organizations and NGO, and this has been carried into tax laws. Today, when you go through the tax laws, specifically under Section 162 that talks about general exemptions, faith-based organizations and NGOs are exempted from paying taxes, provided their activities are not for commercial purposes. Now, if you talk about Zakat and Waqf are not for commercial purposes. So Section 162 of the Nigerian Tax Act has specifically exempted religious organizations, and specifically Zakat and Waqf. It doesn't stop there. When you read further to Section 163 of the Nigerian Tax Act, has provided another leverage for people that are willing to donate to Zakat and Waqf. What that means is that if you contribute any amount, no matter how the amount is, whether the amount is million naira, 100 million naira, or billion naira, that amount is allowed as tax deductible. What that means is that as a business person, contributing, you had earned money to Zakat and Waqf Foundation, whatever you contribute, provide there is a caveat anyway, that amount will be allowed as tax deduction, meaning that you are not going to suffer taxed twice. Whatever you contribute to Waqf or Zakat will be allowed as tax deduction. What do you mean by tax deduction? The tax authority will allow you to deduct it from your total income before you arrive at the tax payment. That is what it means. Then, for Zakat and Waqf, organizations that engage possibly in research and development, they are also allowed, to exempt the amount they spend on research and development for tax purposes. So we have engaged widely during the course of this, committee's work. I will try as much as possible to accommodate all the concerns, of all the faith-based organizations and the NGOs. So to answer that question, I think we have settled that, amicably through the committee's work. That, yeah. I don't think I've answered the second question, but I'll allow you to go. All right.
Thank you very much for joining us on this panel. Now, let's talk about how this tax reforms affect the ordinary Nigerians and what the law says about it. He has quoted some sections of the Constitution already, but let's bring it to the human angle. How does this affect the ordinary man on the street? Speaking living.
Well, thank you very much. I think it was also good for me to say, I don't just say as a lawyer. I was the immediate past chairman of the Organized Private Sector for Nigeria. I also the president of NASIMA, one of the chambers of commerce in Nigeria. I'm currently also the chairman of the Nigerian Turkey Business Council. I had to come back from Accra only yesterday for this event because I was the president there.
As a bill.
Just to come to where my learned friend has said it, it's not as easy as I said it. Under the old law, we're not using BVA, we're not using T. So most of us could escape. Now, collection is centralized. So whatever money you spend, even your way of life, as if I went to talk here with business class, now this man will know. So when I'm filing my tax, you say you made X amount. How come you are able to afford this? So that is the first hit on all of us. And in our society, we all know the government has not been completely responsible. You have what we call the extended family system, where most of us are paying school fees for several extended families. What that the current tax is not that deductible. What it means, suppose I go to literally fall off the radar, and I'm going to have problems. So that is the reason for the crash. That in an unresponsive situation where government is not living up to expectation. In my house, I bought a transformer, I did the road, I spent 100 million to install solar. All these are work of government. If it was available, I would spend that money. So this is the challenge. If any of you go to anywhere to have industries, you can see Abuja are doing several layers of roads. Even the road that is not spoiled, we remove it and replace it. Go to any industrial, anywhere you have industries. The road there is either done by the manufacturer or it is bad. And that's what we call implicit tax. We pay a lot of implicit tax for responsibility government what to do. But not government wants to tax us as if they are in London without paying us London price, paying us London salary. This is a challenge. This is why people is afraid, because we will not escape it. So this is why it's good for all of us to review with ourselves. It's because the only good thing about it, I also tell them is the mistake if you collect my money and I see this man driving a Rolls Royce, I know his salary, I will stop him on the road. Because I make my staff's money. So accountability is going to come in. Nigerians change. They started the revolution. We won't let them drive the Rolls Royce, but we know their salary. So what we need to have a mix. Coming to the issue now, the issue of Zakat and the way I read it is not that easy. There is a new requirement. For you to take that benefit, you have to be properly structured as a charitable institution. If you are not registered with CSE, or any government agency recognizes you as a child police, you cannot enjoy that benefit. And very importantly, your documentation. You have to have receipts. So your chief imam now, for the food he buys, or he awards a contract to build this place, if he doesn't collect VAT, he's liable, he has to pay for it. He makes sure that he's awarding the contract, the primary collector as agent of the state. So there's a need for a lot of information so that people don't fall into a trap which they don't know. I'm not saying they don't people about the tax. It's very good. They started well, but this thing will require a lot of increasing our what we call a digital platform. Take for example when you show invoices now, you are expected to file a copy with the tax man because that is how they track whether you collected the VAT or you collect rent or even for the activities you carry out in the mosque. When you have a school, you have to now put the definition of charitable institution is very strict, not like before under the SITA, which was very loose. All of us will hide somewhere and even make arrangement with the local transfer and go away. The man in Abuja, from Abuja can see you in Kano and see how you are operating. So there is a centralized collection, there is a centralized information, independent information collection, without a centralized responsibility to also provide services, to make sure there is light in my house, to make sure I don't have to pay for my own security. So these are the issues. If government wants to pay like London, because London work, the same people that match your work, every time the government comes in, the first thing they see is tax. Don't they see the bad roads? Don't they see the bad water? Don't they see that people are especially surviving on the outskirts? They know we have a lot of dependents who we pay school fees for. Where is the exemption for that? It's not there.
Right, sorry, thank you.
So these are the things we should. So let's leave the Oibo and go straight to the street so that we know how we come.
You seem to be the voice of the voiceless. My respected brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, when we talk of women, I will now bring us back to our senses to know who we are. We are just more than what we think of ourselves. Women are special creators, created to be independent, so free, precious, with no financial responsibilities or less. When she's in her father's house, the father takes care of her, the husband, her brothers, or sons. If she has none, the community must take care of herself, look her home, take care of her, no matter how rich she is, no matter how highly placed she is. So with this definition, women have the space to invest in zakat and water better than any. So women can now change their thinking of accumulating wealth to do other things that are not necessary to save themselves both here and the hereafter. One, because there is no discrimination between men and women when it comes to zakat and water. Because Allah has already said that believing men and women are allies of one another. They encourage what is good and discourage what is bad. They establish regular prayer and they give out zakat. And when we look at what the Prophet ﷺ says, he so alarming women. He says majority of those in hellfire are women. And the Shaitan says he vowed to ensure that he gets people so that they go to the hell together. And we can see the opportunity that Allah has given us. He gave us no responsibility, financial responsibility. We are being taken care of and we are free to accumulate wealth to own and to donate. So the Shaitan is now playing with our intellect by loving the worldly decorations that are not necessary. The so-called designer perfume, designer shoes, designer bags, designer this and designer that. And by showing ourselves when our husbands have some public offices, either the royal office, either the government political office or whichever, we want to show people that yes, there we are. And that is where the greatest mistake comes. We start computing for ourselves. And the base of competition is for you to show to Allah that yes, you have accepted and appreciated being a woman by donating largely, even more than the men in areas of zakat and wakaf. So women should be involved in all sectors of zakat and wakaf, institutions of zakat and wakaf, either with the government institutions or private institutions. Women which should move to be given out to see that they invest their world and the akhirah. They should disabuse their minds on the worldly things. At times I ask myself, when there is a wedding ceremony or any ceremony, we start thinking or looking at the best. At times you even go and look for, even to rent. Whom would I please? Who will see it? Why? As soon as I wear this thing and then come back home, I will remove it and keep it, and then I say, is there anything, there's no justification there. Thank you.
They do not discriminate whether you're Muslim or you're Christian or you're Catholic. They are looking at Nigerians as citizens. So there isn't any discrimination. Now, it is a requirement of the law through the tax reform that every Nigerian register for tax purposes. Register, underline the word registration. There's after the registration, then eligibility comes in. What we mean by eligibility? A lot of Nigerians are going to be exempted from tax payment, especially the downtrodden. People that do not have up to ₦1 million as their annual income are exempted completely, or 800,000 naira, what the law says. That is the chargeable income, but that amount can go up to 101.2 billion. So a lot of Nigerians that do not have income more than maybe 1.1 million per annum are exempted. So it is religious insensitive, whether you're a Muslim or you're a Christian. But largely, if you are talking about zakat and wakaf institution as an institution, that is why I made a reference to the provisions I quoted of the law. They are exempted completely. However, employees under the Zakat Foundation that earn an income more than the threshold that I have mentioned, 1,800,000 naira, will be subjected to tax. So what's the point he raised about every Nigerian is going to be affected? What we are trying to do is to drive formalization of businesses and Nigerians paying the right fare of taxes. And the issue he raised, whether the government is going to deliver London services. It took us back to the parable of chicken and egg. Which one comes first? Are we going to say that the government will provide a London service before we pay taxes? Or the citizen will pay taxes before the London services comes into the play? Now, it raises a second question of accountability, because once this tax law kicks in, because they have started already 1st January, once we get into them, the implementation takes proper. The expectation is that Nigerians will demand for more accountability, and that's where the social contract between the government and the citizens comes in. I'm paying so much amount of taxes. What is the government giving the return? And the social contract will kick in. And if you take a deeper dive into the tax table itself, it is only those that earn higher that will pay taxes. And I think from around 80 million naira as annual income, you pay higher taxes. Anything lower than that, you pay lower taxes because of the change in the graduated table. In the past, he made reference to CETA and personal income taxes. In the past, where we are coming from, if you earn 1,000 naira, you pay some percent of that 1,000 naira. The only reason why we don't feel the burden is simply because we failed to register with the tax authorities. Now, what changed is that you must register, And after registration, we determine the eligibility to pay. Now, if you earn up to 800,000 naira, you pay nothing in taxes. However, if your income increases, yeah.
Now, Nigerians are very, very confused.
Yeah.
How does the government know? I'm sorry that I was speaking from Mr. Taiwo because I had an interview with him recently.
Oh.
And he did say that the government does not have time going through who says I'm sending gifts to anyone or that. So how does the government determine those who earn 800,000 and those who earn above that? Because a lot of Nigerians are confused about that. How do I know that I fall into this category? Is it the banks? Are you working in collaborations with banks to actually point out people who have more than 800,000 in their account?
All right, thank you so much. You know what? Why Nigerians are having concerns, I think it's because of the misconception, that went viral 2-3 months ago, that once you make a transfer into any bank account, the government is just watching and there's going to be deduction. That is absolutely false. There is a requirement for every Nigerian to file his returns. That is where we get to know. You are expected to file a return at the end of every year. That is, for last year, 2025, you have a grace period of 1st January, 31st March to file your return. And it's only when you file your return that the tax authority will get to know your total income for the preceding year. That is one part. I made mention of registration.
How do you file this report? Because you're moving to the ordinary man.
Okay, because you are not allowing me time to go deeper. That's why.
How do you file your report?
So this is how you do the filing. I made mention of registration. You register with the tax authority depending on your area, your jurisdiction. What you mean by jurisdiction? State of residence. If you are residing in Abuja, you register with the FCTRS, the FCT IRS. If you reside in Kano, you register with Kano IRS. If you are in Lagos, you register with the Lagos IRS. So once you register, you are going to be given what we call tax identification number. By the time you get the tax identification number, at the end of a year that you have almost aggregated all your total income, you do your tax computation. You do it yourself. The government is not going to do the tax computation yourself. This is said Abubakar possibly earning 2 million naira in 2025. So I will do all the computation myself, which we call self-assessment. I will self-assess myself that this is my total income and this is the amount of tax I feel I should pay the government. So using my tax identification number, I will prepare all the returns, whether in paper form or using electronic means. I will send it to the Revenue Authority. The Revenue Authority will now review my returns, possibly electronically or manually. Then they will dissect whether what I'm saying is right or wrong. Then the other side of your question, do we get to know the information through banks? I think this is one of the areas of controversy. What's the requirement on banks is that after every 3 months, the banks are mandated to report to the Revenue Authority the total income of every Nigerian that exceeds 50 million naira. So if you don't earn up to 50 million naira within 3 months, you are less affected. You have no issues to worry about. And for companies, more than 100 million naira. And that is the area of controversy where the issues were raised as whether the tax also were affected or not. Now, for individuals, with the new released version of the law, it's 100 million. If you don't earn up to 100 million in 3 months, banks will not report you. So there isn't any controversy as to whether the banks will be releasing personal data of their customers. It's in this information. For companies, it's 250 million. So if you check Section 9 of the Tax, all these things are detailed. So Nigerians should be rest assured there isn't any, surveillance on Nigerians when it comes to their income, just as the reason is that the only thing they are expected to do is to do the right thing, register and ensure that once your income level surpasses the threshold, you do the right thing. And by the time you do the right thing, you see for yourself that what you are going to be is going to be lower than what you used to be, if at all you are paying before. The only difference now is that every Nigerian that earns more than the threshold has to pay taxes. That's the only difference. And that is why Nigerians are concerned, because we are not used to paying taxes.
All right. Thank you very much. And thank you. Let's circle back to Dr. Lamido in Nigeria.
Well, alhamdulillah, I am not used to complex terms. They also, when you use complex language or terms, they add to my complexity of understanding. So I will use simple terms, inshallah. Well, before I respond to this, the issue of women, I think, is very important when it comes to the issue of zakah and waqf. If you allow me, I will add a word or two. If you look at the history of waqf in particular, which contributed in Islamic history more in sustainable economic development for the ummah than zakah, because zakah has restrictions that waqf doesn't have. If you look at the history of waqf, you will see that in other words, you can say the history of waqf is the history of contribution of women to development, because of the very significant, special, unique contribution of women in the development of waqf. From the time of the Prophet ﷺ, we know the special role of women among the companions, wives of the Prophet ﷺ, and the types of awqaf they dedicated of their jewelries and other things. But importantly also, the waqf of Zubaydah, which in history is counted the most important and the richest, the most costly waqf in history in terms of resources. Waqf of Zubaydah bint Ja'far al-Mansur, which was done just about 200 years after Hijrah, but it still exists. The benefit is being reaped in Saudi Arabia and other places. But then also there is the longest and most important waqf in education. The first waqf, the first university, yeah, don't worry, we are talking about women. We have to give even the young women the right to also cry, isn't it? Yeah, they have that right.
I have all this.
Yeah.
I'm yet to say.
Yeah, she has the right, you know. Yeah, somebody says she's crying because of tax. And that's why we do waqf of time for her. Alhamdulillah. The longest, the first university in the world, whether in the west or in the south or in the east or in the central, was University of Al-Qarawiyyin. It was initiated by a woman. It was a waqf of a woman called Fatima Al-Fihri in Fas. So you can see women have done that. So they donated, they managed, they contributed, they created awqaf, they created waqf education, and importantly also, women have been beneficiaries of waqf throughout history. Coming back to the issue of your question of economic development or economic empowerment. You see, as I said, experts of the history of Islamic civilization and experts of Islamic economics are unanimous on the fact that in history, Muslim development was essentially tied down to the history of waqf and zakat. Yes, other aspects of the economy were very, very important. But then, today, even the United Nations will tell us, if you talk of development, you're talking about education and healthcare as not only the major means to development, but being development itself. Now, if education and healthcare represent the most important things as far as sustainable development is concerned, then we look at Islamic history and see, from the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and especially from the time when Muslim governments became stable, from the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab through to the time of Muawiyah, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, and so on, and up to the Ottoman Empire, the sole financier of of education and healthcare has always been waqf. And that's why experts say that in Islamic history, Muslim governments never had anything called Ministry of Education or Ministry of Health. Why? Because there were independent awqaf that were 100% taking care of education and healthcare. So all the universities, All the development of Muslims that you hear in terms of education, research centers, centers of excellence, discoveries, Ibn Khaldun of this, Ibn this and that, all these were a product of Awqaf. Awqaf built the schools, Awqaf paid the salaries, Awqaf provided the hostels, Awqaf provided the research instruments, Awqaf provided the libraries, the laboratories, Awqaf funded the researches, and so on and so forth. So you can see Waqaf, if we want today to develop educationally, if we want today to develop in the aspect of healthcare, I'm making reference to these two, not because Waqaf only funded these two, but there were also other aspects. Waqaf provided jobs. Agriculture was solely, to a large extent, financed through Waqaf. Up to 19th century, when the colonial monsters came to the Muslim world, they call them masters, we call them monsters anyway. When they came to the Muslim world, whether it was in Morocco or Algeria or in Turkey or where, they found that from half to two-thirds of agricultural arable land were Awqaf lands. So you can see Waqaf was the financier of agriculture. So and so on and so on. So today also, if you look at the Muslim world, that is the role it
plays. Okay, we're gradually coming to the end of this panel discussion, but let's go to Barrister and say something to them differently about, managing it, about the way to go about it. Maybe suggest a better way. What would you say to them?
Well, first of all, just to respond to one of the 800,000 mentioned to is equal per annum. So even if you are minimum wage, you are already estimated by 40,000 or 70,000 per month. The only allowance is 500,000 for accommodation. And we all know that that one cannot give you a one room in Yaya. So what are the challenges?
Everybody is taxable.
First of all, the law is good for Nigeria. But you need to have a phased implementation. Because even in NRS, they are not even ready. When I say they are not ready, there are several guidelines that is required to make it operational to implementable. Take for example, the issue of the donations. For one, if you are reselling the investment or the investment, you are likely to pay capital gain tax if you don't structure very well. So you need now, I'm telling this phone, immediately to hire a very good digital accountant. I'm serious. Because the requirements are so high and the compliance threshold that you cannot do it alone. I'm not saying that all of you need to read the law. Don't say you have to understand it. I'm not an accountant, I'm just a baby lawyer. So they are ready back to back. So they want to execute them. So they need to be guidelines. Because most of the donations under religious is done in secrecy. The man that comes here in the evening to bring the endowment does not want to be known by any person. Then now, the law requires it should be known. So most of them will step back because they don't want to show they have that kind of capacity. How do we resolve that? They have to be a religious council, which will also issue a certificate, which will be available to the taxman. That council got the integrity. Mr. Dele comes, I want to donate to the building, but I don't want my name to be mentioned. That's a thing, without regard to what the value is, I don't want to use it to claim the tax exemption. When in Malaysia, something like that is not operable. For Zaka and WAF, it's transitable. Then what it puts here is so general that for you to be able to move in requirements, take for example, you have a school. You must show for some promotional activity that it is strictly that the boy does not go to outside the charitable trust. If it goes outside, one couple goes out, you have to pay tax on it. So it's a very difficult, we are not that educated, every family don't come with to be able to find these three tax returns. So this is the challenge. What they put us in, remember in rural areas, there's no light, there's no water, everything does not work. Then you want me to find and eat tax every month to you. How do I do it? It's not practical, it's not operable. So the result should be from here that we like the law, but we need time to operate everything. We can have a phase, 21 months, so that let them even build their own capacity. All the guidelines they are drafting, they cannot put it on us. Guidelines are done based on stakeholders' statements. We have to see what the region requires and what the department requires so that you can fulfill both. We don't have to expose ourselves to the third parties when our members will be pulling back. They are not able to serve God the way they want to serve. So it's important that those guidelines are in place before we start implementing. So upon this month, we're already rushing to do our payee. City Wahala, we don't pay this penalty. That law, every clause is penalty. If you miss one threshold, you pay. So it could be part of the issue of government, that government is they will have their accountability. You don't use left hand to start eating at old age. The government has begun the oil revenue. They are not able to show us what it is. This is not that you collect money and show us. Please, don't let us be deceived. Let them start by being accountable for the one they are collecting today. They will not know maybe we give them more response, they will do more. For now, let's be looking at them with suspicion. But if they start behaving, thank you.
As we have heard from our brother, there are so many other women that invested in water and is still in existence and continue to serve humanity for generations. So my advice for us is to cut our expenses on what we buy and what we do, especially in celebrating marriages, ceremonies, naming ceremonies, radio halls in millions of naira. Makeups, you just pay makeup at the rate of 5 million naira for just few hours. You rent a hall of about 15, 20, 100 million naira. So let us cut all this. And then from today, let us be partners in progress and then be members of Habibia and any other Zakat and Wakaf organization that is near to us, wherever you are, so that you now dedicate yourself to be paying certain percent of your earnings. Either as a salarian, it doesn't need to be too much. You may say, I will be giving 5% of my salary, 1% or whatever percent. And then from today, you may now say, oh, from today, if I wear the clothing of maybe 100,000, I will be buying the one of 80,000 so that 20,000 will be given as a worker to an organization. You may also decide if your neighbor passed away or if you have within the family somebody that is passed, then the orphans, you can decide to take one person to take the education of that child up to the university level. And then also we should engage in enlightening our women because most of them don't even have the knowledge of what water is. And then we all feel that to give out zakat until when you have millions of naira, when it reaches the nisab, and then it stays for 1 year before you give out zakat. But there are so many researches now that maybe Dr. Lamido will now even tell us it doesn't need to reach that much because for how long you've been working for many years and you will retire after 30 or 35 years or 40 years. It means you will have nothing to contribute to your deed because you don't reach that amount. So it's just for us to now accept, just as the Malaysians are doing in other countries, each worker pays just 100 naira. If we accept that and we have tested and then trusted organizations that are transparent and accountable, then we organize ourselves and we pay maybe just 100 naira to each member of every family. You will see that we realize in hundreds of millions of naira. And we will make a work plan and think of what we want to do at the education sector, health sector, because now if one is sick, if you are rich, you have to run down to either Egypt, you run down to maybe India, Saudi Arabia, or wherever. Why don't we think on how do we now establish our hospitals, government hospitals, to now train those that have, some of us, the children to read radiography, for them to be gynecologists, pediatricians, surgeons, and so on and so forth. We can organize ourselves and say, okay, this part section of women will now give scholarship to those that will read this. And then at the agriculture sector, we should also think of investing and then maybe producing certain group of maybe certain species of food that will be organizing, we will create food bank in our areas so so that whoever doesn't have food to eat, we can go right to that person's house and then package and then give a full package of food to a family that are fully in need. So my advice to women is that we should rethink and then change our thinking and then partner with Al-Habibiyah, Gombe, Al-Ikhlas, or wherever we are, to be actively involved in all zakat and wakaf organizations and commissions so that we contribute our quota to get a good reward both here and to be highly placed in Jannah Freedom, inshallah. There is no Islamic history that no one talks about Nana Khadija. She was the first woman that accepted Islam and supported her husband. She spent all her wealth and resources to the early development of Islam. She gave him all the care and support. And there is no hadith book that we can ever open without seeing the name of Nana Aisha narrated a hadith. And we can see Nana Fatima. She was also a nurse. She participated in the battlefield by treating those that are sick or those that are wounded. So who are our models as Muslims? They are the models. We have heard about Fatima and Fikri. We have about so many of them. So let them be our role models. May Allah be our guide.
I think it's one of the best so far in Nigeria that have opportunity not only submitting your report, but also to follow up with the implementation. But unfortunately, what are you doing? Like Barrister you mentioned, you need to develop guidelines that will be actionable that Nigeria can move with. That is number one. Number two, what are you doing to control the issue of misinformation and disinformation regarding the implementation of that act? Because it's very key. And like I said, I've not seen the terms of reference to know whether your terms of reference include the framework on the utilization of money generated. Imagine your bank sending SMS to you every evening around 11:30, 12 a.m. on stamp duty. And do you develop any framework on utilization of only stamp duty? Let's take stamp duty. Because what they have been deducted since January 1 till today from Nigerians is not a small money. And a situation whereby your committee will not be riding Prado Jeep. From where? So it's very key. Then the trust. If you look at your committee, that gap, because Nigeria don't have trust in what government is doing.
Okay, let's see the response to that. Please.
Yes. No, let me clear this trust. Because imagine National Assembly saying A, Nigerians are saying B. At what level did the committee get it wrong? Or Nigerians get it wrong? That we have gazetted and non-gazetted copy. Because that trust, we cannot build it with Nigerians. And finally, the thing that you mentioned, I remember I was at one of your engagements. Dr. Edele said, thing is thing, nothing will happen with tax ID. Unfortunately, last week I did a consultancy, and they deducted WHT from the money. They wanted to remit. The guy was asking me, this your team, is it complying with 2026 Act? I said, I don't know. Unfortunately, the guy called me back and said they can't remit the money. I went back to the JTB platform. I was directed to the new website, and I put in my NIN, and I got tax ID. So which is misinforming who? Do you get it?
Okay, thank you very much. Please respond.
Thank you so much for giving this answer. Yes, there are frameworks that are being developed, especially on the expenditure framework, which is going to be released at the first quarter of this year. After the passage of all the laws, it's going to be followed up with the framework for expenditure. And that is why when Barrister is issued for accountability, yes, all essence is to raise the social contract framework for Nigerians and the government. That is, being developed as sustained. Then regulations, yes, there are regulations that have been developed by both NIRS at the federal level and also at the state level. For me, like a representative, for instance, I can't do the specific. We have developed a lot of regulations whereby the citizens are going to comply. And by doing it in a phase outreach as recommended by the university, this is something that we've taken in as a recommendation. We're doing it in a phase outreach. Of course, we cannot imagine how this, more than 600 pages of laws have been consumed by Nigerians at once. Is that they face implementation application. Around handling this information, the committee has engaged various influencers, social media handlers to counter all the misinformation that is being spread around. That is being taken care of. Of course, we cannot take away trust deficit between the citizens and the government. That exists for more than 25 years. And that is what the tax law is trying to address. Trying to formalize everything to ensure that when your payment is made, you can trace your payment to the bank account, and you can also demand for account of stewardship of money that will be from the government. That also raises accountability and also entrenches the social. Then on the team, of course, the tax law says tax ID, not TIN. And tax ID can be anything digitally organized by the revenue authority. In this case, we realize that national identity, which is name, is the only tax ID that can be used across all tax states of the federation. Because if you have a customer direct say from Sokoto to Lagos, you are not going to use your tax system. If you pay your taxes to say to Lagos IRS and you migrate to Sokoto, your tax history that you've been paying for the past years will not be lost because you need identifier there. It's only going to migrate from one jurisdiction to the other. Most of these concerns are being addressed, and I know in the fullness of time, the Nigerians are going to be very much, at home with some of these provisions of the Reform Act. Thank you so much. I hope I have addressed some of the concerns. We can continue the engagement of life.
Yes. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. We'll have just. Why does WACAP donation be fixed in the bank and the proceeds used for development instead of using everything?
What?
Why does WACAP donation be fixed in the bank and the proceeds used for development instead of using everything? How? Okay, why do you have to? Okay, so you clarify that. That's our question, and just make it relative so you can clarify that.
If I understand the question properly, I think in the beginning the Imam mentioned that if we generate 1 billion, we are not going to spend in the 1 billion, but we will invest the funds and only distribute the yields, the profits, the gains from the investment. Is the question is the question related to this? No? You are the one asking the question. Okay, what's the question, please? Yeah.
And then I wonder, what is the 1 billion sitting doing in the bank?
Okay. No, we didn't say. I understand you. Two things. We didn't say the money will be kept in the bank. That's not what was said. If that is what we understood, that was not the point. The point is the money would be invested. I hope we get it. The cash, 1 billion, will be invested in a halal investment, a low risk halal investment. And then the gains, the proceeds will be distributed. That is the correct point. Why do we do that? Because we are doing waqf. We are not doing ordinary charity. In ordinary charity, sadaqah, you collect, you disburse. If it is zakah, you collect, you disburse. But if it is waqf, what makes it waqf is the perpetuity of the assets, is the permanence, is the untouchability, unreducibility of the assets. Keeping the assets to stand, that is to be waqf. If you are working now, we say waqf, you stop, isn't it? So we stop the asset from being depleted, but then we ensure that the benefit continues to flow to designated beneficiaries, and that is what makes it waqf, and that is what makes it sustainable. That is what makes it sadaqah jariyah, perpetual charity. Correct? Understood? Yeah, of course, if now I build a plaza with 20 shops, and donate that as a waqf. The proceeds, the rentals will be distributed. The asset remains. If I buy sukuk, isn't it? A 10-year sukuk has been issued by the federal government, and we have 1 billion. We give the federal government, we subscribe to the sukuk, isn't it? The 1 billion remains, and every year they give us 16-18% depending upon the returns. At the end of it, they give us back our 10 billion, we reinvest it. How will we get it? The 10 billion remains and the proceeds come, and so on and so forth. Or if Al-Habibiyah, one of the things I want to challenge Al-Habibiyah, if Al-Habibiyah build a 5-star Sharia compliant halal hotel, seeing how we give millions to others, isn't it? And then it does that in a choice area in Abuja, where Muslims now have about 100 rooms that generate 50,000 average every day, isn't it? So you have 50,000 times 100, giving you 5 million times 10 days 50 times 30 days 150 million times 3 times 12. We generate that and we solve the problem of Al-Majri with that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Barry. Here, we are bringing, it might also be here, we are bringing other experts also that will continue. The topic is the Muslim and the new tax regime. So we still want to bombard them to the level that average person on the street will know what we are going to have and what is going to be our challenge. Don't be discouraged that we didn't answer your question today. I assure you, the conversation will continue on the 22nd of February. Write it down. Whether I invite you or not, just come by 10 a.m. That day it continues. So I want to thank you for this excellence. Mr. Adeloye, I don't know what to say, how to say thank you, but nobody is standing up. I'm taking over a bit now. Mr. Adeloye just came with the president yesterday from Turkey. He's the president of Nigeria Turkish Business Council. So we want to thank you for being able to make it, and I want to appreciate you. Before I continue, Chief, you said you want to say something? Okay, 1 minute. Okay, sir.